The resource component is one of the first components you'd use in a React admin application. It has three functions. First, it lets you define routes for list, edition, creation, and show pages. It creates a context with the name of the resource accessible to all descendants, and it defines a global configuration that will be accessible from the entire application, giving access to settings for this resource. Let's see that in practice. Here I have an empty application created with React admin. It has absolutely no content, and I'm going to add a product resource for it. Resource is a React admin application, a React admin component. And then for this resource, I'm going to add pages, and I'm going to add a list pages, which will be an empty page with just a title. And same for the edit page, same for the create page, same for the show page. And now, whenever I go to the /product URL, I see this product list component defined with this list prop. Same when I type product /one identifier, I get to the product edit. If I add show, I get to the product show. And if I go to the products /create URL, then I get to the product create page. So at its core, resource is a shortcut to write routes that we call CRUD routes for showing a list of records, for editing a record, creating a record, and showing the details of a record. And that's the first application. Usually we won't use homemade component like this one. We use components from React admin, for instance, product lists that I built. I also have a product edit, and these components allow me to list the available products in my API. When I click on it, I get to the show view where I can see its details and associated reviews. And I click on the edit button, you can see the URL changes. I have a form that allows me to edit a given product, and I can also create a new one here. So the code of these components is classic React admin code. The list page uses the list component, the edit page uses the edit component, etc. So that's not what's important here. What's important is that I just hooked these products to the URLs starting with /products, which is defined here. So that's the first function. The second function that I told you about is that it creates a context with this name, and this context is available from everywhere. This is what allows the list component here to know which resource to ask the data provider for. So for instance here, if I refresh the page, I see that it will call getList products. Where do these products come from? From the resource context. And you can see this resource context for real if I just render it. So here I'm going to call the record context using a hook. The resource context are using the hook that is called use resource context, and I'm just going to render it in an H1, and what it shows is products. So resource in the admin app here defines a resource context that is accessible from all its descendants, including the list component, which uses it to query the data provider. And the one last function of this component resource is that it defines a application-wide configuration. So for instance, let's say add another resource called reviews, resource name equals reviews, and I'm going to use guessers for the list view. I need to close this resource here. And now you can see that I have a list of reviews. The list of reviews shows the associated product with each review, but it only shows its ID. That's not very convenient. Products here don't, I mean, they have an ID. When I click on it, I see that it's ID 126, but it's not the way this tool represents the record. The normal representation for a product is its reference. So it would be better if here for each product we would display the reference. We could update the list here of reviews to say display the product reference instead of its ID, but instead we're going to change the central configuration for this resource and change the record representation and saying its reference. And now RectAdmin components everywhere in the application know that to represent a product, they have to use its reference and not its ID. So resource is also the way to define central configuration for a given resource. And you can actually see that because as soon as I add a resource, it also adds an item in the menu, because resource, the configuration defined in a resource, is accessible from everywhere, including the menu. And that's it for the resource component.